If you've recently purchased a Microsoft 365 subscription and you are building out a Microsoft 365 environment, one of the first things that you'll be doing is creating your user accounts if you've migrated from another tool, another email system, document management system, or even from an on-premises solution. You probably have already synchronized your user to the cloud. You've synchronized your users to Azure Active Directory. However, if this is a greenfield environment, this is a brand new environment that you are setting up. You will need to create user accounts. Now to create user accounts, we have two places or two locations where we can perform that task. One of those is from the Azure Active Directory Admin Center and the other is from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So let's go ahead and start creating user accounts. So I'm going to navigate down to Users and Active Users. Now I already have some users here, but to add a user I can either do it as a single user or in bulk. If I click on Add Multiple Users, then I will be doing that using a CSV file or a comma-separated value file. It's essentially a spreadsheet type file that I would open up in Excel. I can actually download a template of how that file should be structured. When I click on Add Multiple Users, it gives me that link. I download that CSV file, I add my usernames, my passwords, and the phone numbers of all my users. And then I upload that CSV file back. And that's how you do a bulk creation of user accounts. If I want to create only a single user, I would click on Add a User and I'm going to put a first name and last name for the user. So I'm going to call this user Michael Smith and this display name will be Michael Smith. And then I can specify a username for the user. Now the username is actually a combination of an alias, which in this case will be smith and then a domain name. So the domain name will be this part right here. Now we've already created domains in our environment and so this is one of the domains that have been successfully verified. You'll remember from the video when we created domains, we have to verify domain. In that list of domains will only appear those domains that have been verified. And then I can specify a password. I can either let Microsoft 365 generate a password automatically, or I can put a password myself. And I'm going to put a password that meets the security guidelines of my organization for minimum password requirements. Then I can specify if the user must change the password at the first sign-in and whether or not I'm going to send that password by email. I'm going to click on Next. My browser is asking me to remember my password, but I will say no. And then I can assign the license to the user. Now you remember that product licenses are purchased for your Microsoft 365 tenant, and then we can assign them to the user. So I need to pick licenses for which I have available licenses. Here I have one of 10,000 licenses that is available. These other licenses here, I am out of licenses. Which means that if I click on the checkbox, it will actually try to purchase one license for me, if credit card added to my account. Of course, you can always create a user without a product license, and that user would simply have a user account and a password, but they would not be able to access any workloads. You notice that there is a role that's associated to the user. The role is user. So we looked at administrative roles using RBAC in another video of this course. Here, this is a user role. So this is a non-administrative role. All users are assigned to that role. Then under Profile Info, I can specify additional information for the user, such as his role, his department, his address, and so on. I'm going to click on Next, click on Finish. Adding in the user is being added to my environment. Now notice that Michael Smith has a username, a password, and the licenses. None have been bought, but some licenses have been assigned. I can close this and then search in my users for the new user. Sometimes it takes a couple minutes for the user to appear, but there he is. Michael Smith that has been created, and when I click On Michael Smith, I can actually go ahead and modify and configure additional options for Michael Smith. I can manage his username, view his sign-in attempts. I can control the devices. If he's signed into a device that has been enrolled into Microsoft Intune, I can control that. I can manage the licenses, add or remove licenses for the user, and I can perform additional tasks related to the email workload or the OneDrive workload as well. You can reset the password or quickly block the user from signing in. For whatever reason you want to prevent the user from signing in, you can block that user quite quickly. So that's how we create one user in our tenant, and that user becomes a full-fledged member user as part of our Azure Active Directory. So even if I opened up my Azure AD Admin Center, I would see Michael Smith there as a user, and I would be able to control that user and manage that user. Like all other user accounts that are part of Azure AD, even though I created the account from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Now I just want to point out that there are other users as well. There are guest users. Now guest users are external users that are invited into my tenant. I cannot add guest users from Microsoft 365. When I click on this link here, it will actually open up the Azure Active Directory Admin Center. So clicking on that link will open up a separate admin center from which we would be able to add guest users.